私の乳爆ラプとはうなぎでいっぱいです。
Developer Pieces Entertainment has taken over the reins from Arrowhead Studios for the sequel to 2011's cult spellslinger Magicka, and though the original game's winning blend of gratuitous friendly fire, cheeky humour and elemental spell cocktails remains, there's been a few key changes that make for a slicker, more responsive experience. One major change, for example, is that you can now move while casting your spells, which ramps up the pace of the game considerably. Rather than having to meekly stand there typing in a spell combination while a goblin makes mincemeat of your lower intestines, you can now fire off a burst of scalding steam as you dance away, cackling like a maniac. Not that the difficulty has been lowered all that much by this newfound freedom of movement. Enemies will still charge at you mercilessly, and it only takes a slip of a thumb on the controller for them to stomp you into pieces. Particularly nasty enemy types have their own dirty tricks. One mid-game regular likes to summon a wall of stone behind you to cut off your retreat, then charge full pelt at you with axe in hand. The big crabs you'll run into early on are invulnerable to attacks from the front and require you to either freeze them in place or act as a distraction while a buddy flanks them. Though there's definitely a more than fair number of suicidal lunatics amongst them, the total roster of enemies this time around is far more extensive than the first game. It's not another 10 hours or so of blasting goblins into chunks. Then again, you will be doing quite a lot of that. Magicka 2 doesn't change up its magic system too much, largely relying on the same blend of elemental experimentation and baffling button combinations to generate that entirely unique blend of slapstick lunacy. As before, you can mix together various elements to create wildly differing effects. You might slap together a fire and water spell, for example, to produce a nasty gout of steam. Mixing earth, shield and fire and then popping an area cast meanwhile creates a wall of flaming stone around you. Once you've queued up your spells, you can choose to cast them as ranged attacks, buff up your main hand weapon, convert them into area effect spells or cast them directly on yourself. There's an unholy amount of possible spell combinations to find, even taking into account some inevitable duplication. The first game ultimately suffered a bit when you train your fingers sufficiently enough to quickly tap in a few blockbuster spells, like the unholy Steam Lightning Death Ray combination that got me through most of the game. This rendered most encounters a bit too easy, so Magicka 2 removes these ultimate combinations, stripping your spell options back very slightly to the 8 core elements, no combination of which stands out as obviously overpowered. This encourages experimentation and adaptation, rather than simply spamming a few reliable super attacks. In another nice touch, some of your standby options like revive, haste, push and so on are now mapped to specific keys, each set on cooldown. This saves you from messing up an important revive in the thick of combat. Hardcore Magicka players might scoff at such flagrant user friendliness, but I think it's a fair compromise that's acceptable given the faster pace of the sequel. There has been a definite swing towards action RPG responsiveness in Magicka 2, which makes the game feel much smoother to play and easier to get to grips with. The story campaign itself will last you around 6 hours or so, and it's a largely enjoyable fantasy romp with tongue firmly set in cheek. Expect pop culture references, goofy faux Scandinavian burbling, and rampant silliness. It does occasionally threaten to become a bit much, but in the end it's hard to completely turn against a game that features, as your mentor, a murderous vampire who carries an array of comedy props to fit in place of his missing hand. There's some nice and colourful environments to visit, some tricky boss fights, and plenty of unlockables for you to hunt down. In fact, the fun really begins once you've completed the game. Throughout your playthrough, you'll unlock new staves, new robes and new weapons, which each mix your stats around in interesting ways. Even better, you'll unlock new artifacts, special modifiers that can be used to completely mess with the way the game plays. Usable in both the campaign mode and the extensive challenge levels, these range from simple damage and health buffs to insane teleportation rules, comedy laugh tracks and more. It's essentially like having your own simple set of mod tools to mess around with. It's buckets of fun and it's going to be a huge coup for Magicka 2 going forward. There's buckets of potential here for future DLC. While theoretically you could play Magicka 2 solo, you'd have to be pretty persistent to do so. Levels are clearly designed with multiple players in mind, so every now and then you get a situation that's teeth-grindingly frustrating to handle on your own. Enemies, aside from the occasional mage, tend to run straight towards you. Without the distraction of 3 other robed idiots scampering around, that tends to result in a score of goblins slowly knifing you to pieces while you backpedal madly, cursing and trying to get the right combination together for a fireball. Even with friends, there are spots where the difficulty level spikes up harshly. One encounter in particular, with a combination of poison spitting plants and ice crabs that froze me in place, made me want to hurl my computer down the deepest, darkest hole I could possibly find. Moments like this are thankfully rare, and most of the issues with the game disappear once you hire another robed miscreant to accompany you / become the subject of your misplaced fireball attacks. Fortunately, the simple drop-in multiplayer seems reliable, with none of the jankiness, crashes and connection issues that plagued the original Magicka at launch. As of this review, of course, the servers haven't been exposed to heavy traffic, so I can't make any promises as to their stability post-launch. What I can say is that I haven't encountered any major problems at all so far. Magicka 2 offers a smoother, more comfortable experience than its predecessor, but that doesn't mean the series has lost its signature charm. It's still insane madcap fun, but somehow manages to make an absolutely unintuitive control system into a strength rather than a weakness. Played as a drop-in multiplayer game, it's an entertaining, amusing hack and slash, but with a group of friends, it's an absolute riot. Magicka 2 scores a well-deserved 8.5 out of 10. For more reviews, previews and other content from GameWatcher, please subscribe to our YouTube channel below, or follow us on Twitter at GameWatcher.com.
Surrender!